Recycling is a lot like building a birdhouse. When you do it right, you use a lot less energy. Like how a recycled aluminum can takes 95% less energy to make than a new one.
Learn everything you need to know about recycling at recycleright.org.
Recycling is a lot like building...
What would the world look like without any stormwater solutions? What if there were no drains, pipe, chambers, or treatment under your feet? It's probably something that never crossed your mind. How would you go to work, school, visit family, play outside? At Advanced Drainage Systems, we build products that are engineered for the if and ready for the when. You may not see our products every day, but we are there. We're there, safeguarding our environment and communities by capturing rain in basins, conveying water through pipe, and storing it in chambers before treating and returning water back to nature. And we do it all so you can be here, looking up and moving forward into a more beautiful, more sustainable world.
Welcome to Trash Talk with Phil.
Hi, I'm Phil. Hi, I'm Fill Me Up, and today we're getting the lowdown on sorting home waste from my friend Sarah.
Welcome to my humble abode.
Let's head inside. Hi, Sarah. Did you know the average American family produces 6,570 pounds of trash every year?
Don't I know it? I'm committed to reducing the garbage my family sends to the landfill. So I carefully sort our waste into these 3 bins. I even keep this little bin in my car to keep trash from blowing out the window.
That's great. Can you show us how you sort that trash?
Sure, let's walk through some common items. Where do you think this one goes?
Into the recycling.
That's right.
Now, which of these items is actually recyclable? A pizza box, soup can, junk mail, or a milk jug? Tricked you. All 4 of these items can go straight into recycling. No problemo.
Now what about these?
Into miscellaneous it goes.
I put gently used items like clothes and books into a separate bin. And when it's full, I donate them.
Donating is a great way to reduce waste and give items a second life.
There are some things that just can't be recycled, like our bunny's dirty Betty. When our bunny finishes his snacks, I make sure to take out the leftover scraps and save them for our home composter.
That makes me really happy to hear. Thanks for showing us how you sort through waste today, Sarah.
No problem.
For more tips and literacy lessons, follow us on social and make sure to join us for our next Trash Talk adventure.
Good morning. Welcome to today's Environmental Professional Network program. I hope you've enjoyed your breakfast so far. My name's Tim Haab, and I'm the interim director of Ohio State School of Environment and Natural Resources. Thanks for being here, and I also want to extend a welcome to those joining online right now via the EPN YouTube channel. I'm going to apologize in advance. I've got a little bit of a cold, and my voice keeps coming and going, so I may cut my comments just a little bit short here. But for those watching via YouTube, please see on the online brochure link that Molly Bean's dropping into the chat right now. This brochure contains today's agenda and information about each of our speakers, including their professional bios. Here in the room, there's a QR code located on your table that will take you to the same online digital brochure. Take a picture of that QR code to view the brochure. Some paper copies of the program are at your tables, which we encourage you to share. The EPN has had the privilege of working with the team at Ohio State's Facilities Operations and Development Department to try out and onboard various strategies to make our monthly breakfast programs into official zero waste events. This process involves purchasing and setting up the necessary composting, recycling, and trash containers, and creating an intentional and accurate set of communication resources to ensure that our program's food and material products are navigated to their appropriate composting, recycling, and trash destinations. Over the last 6 or 7 years, we, along with many others working in event management in Ohio State, have navigated changes in our relationship with catering companies and contracting services, some supply chain snafus, that whole COVID-19 situation, and all the ups and downs with food-based event programming. So kudos to the many in the room who, within your respective fields and domains, have done your best to continue to enhance our material diversion and to attain consistent and official zero waste events status here at Ohio State. One challenge for our EPN team this semester has been securing available and affordable compostable utensils. I want to thank Molly Kathleen and Mary Leciejewski at FOD, as well as Kathy Seraph and her team at University Catering for helping us design and today unveil our newest strategy in offering zero waste programming. Ohio State's Office of Student Life and Dining Services has provided us with these zero waste toolkits, which feature the reusable plates, bowls, cups, and cutlery items that you're utilizing now. To our knowledge, this is our first time these toolkits have been used outside of a dining hall. While we hope that you take home new ideas and connections from the program, please don't leave today with any of these university-owned reusable wares. The EPN will be charged for each item not returned, and I'd hate for our fiscal team to have to tell Kalia and Joe that we've overspent their budget due to some missing forks and knives. You can help us return these toolkits with all the pieces accounting for by scraping food off into the compost bin and returning all the red or scarlet colored dining materials to the bins located near the exits when our program ends at 9:30. At the end of this morning's session, I'll talk to you more about how you can access these zero waste toolkits for your own programming here at Ohio State and to reduce event waste produced on campus. Last month, we learned about leading sustainability strategies within the fashion and textile industries and specific circular design techniques to minimize waste and to upcycle raw and processed materials. We learned that it takes all sections of society, including our private companies, governmental regulators, civic society, consumers, and all parts of the supply chain to effectively move the needle in this field. We know that in this work, there will be tension and conflict, there will be collaboration and compromise. What excites me about today's event is that we're back to focusing on the truly local. There's a terrific panel waiting here for us at the front of the room, each one of them committed environmental professionals seeking to do their part to see all sides of material management, specifically for plastics. Something they also share is their presence in a shared geography, that is Central Ohio's community. Sustainable design, circularity, and upcycling are strengthened in practice when there are geographically clustered entities with a shared interest and enjoy a mutual beneficial association with each other. The agenda located on your program outlines the two-part panel structure that we've convened for this very important topic. Next to the agenda are speaker bios for each of the panelists, which I encourage you to reference throughout the morning. First to speak, and someone who deserves much thanks and recognition for not only moderating today, but also playing a key role in designing today's program, is Josh Knights, Director of Partnerships for the Sustainability Institute at Ohio State. Josh will take an active role in moderating our two panels and will leave us time in about an hour for an interactive Q&A session with the 6 panelists. Both of us here in this room, and both for us here in the room and for those viewing online. For those on YouTube, please feel free to utilize the chat function to post your comments, thoughts, and questions throughout this morning's program. Our team will be reviewing those questions, and we'll also take questions from the in-person audience after 9:15 this morning. Our first panel consists of Becky, Brian, and Christian. Consisting of Becky, Brian, and Christian, we'll explore the question, why are plastics so complicated to recycle? After about 25 minutes of dialogue, Andrew, Aryeh, and Mary will address the topic, how do we make the public a plastics recycling partner? So, Josh, thank you again for helping us structure today's program. Start the program, come on up.
All right, good morning, everyone. Yeah, that's better. So as Tim said, I am Josh Knights. I serve as Director of Partnerships at the Sustainability Institute on campus. It's my pleasure to moderate this EPN Breakfast. Plastics, so we got your number. Where's Joe? Joe's very proud of the title for this particular event, and I have to say, props, it's very, very clever. So for those of you who don't know, the Sustainability Institute was founded in 2019, and our mission really is to take the strengths that Ohio State has in terms of research, student learning, campus stewardship to build a more sustainable, resilient future for all. And if you don't know about us and you want to check us out, go to si.osu.edu. All right, so show of hands, how many people in the room have seen the 1967 film, The Graduate, starring Dustin Hoffman? All right, so for those of you who just raised your hand, you know where I'm going with this. Yes. But for those of you who haven't, there's a scene where Dustin Hoffman's character, who's a student who's recently graduated and doesn't really know what to do with himself, he's taken aside by a friend of the family to get a little fatherly advice. And the advice goes like this. I just want to say one word to you, this man says to Hoffman's character, just one word, plastics. And when Hoffman says he doesn't understand, the man says, there's a great future in plastics. Shh, enough said. And then he walks away like mysteriously. So The Graduate's a classic for many, many reasons, but who knew that it would be so prophetic when it came to the future of polymers? So fast forward from the 1960s to today, and plastics, they're just ubiquitous. They've lowered the cost of manufacturing products in almost every industrial sector. They've revolutionized packaging and the marketing that goes with it. They've made our lives a lot safer by preventing the spread of disease, and they've added convenience to our everyday lives, especially when it comes to the consumption of food and beverages. They have also become a serious environmental problem. At a macro scale, plastic items can be found in abundance everywhere on the planet, in our waterways, in marine environments, causing harm to the life there. And within the last decade, a lot of attention has turned to how plastics are changing the microenvironment too. Many of you have heard about microplastics. These are pieces of plastics that are smaller than 5 millimeters in length that are shed by plastic products, or in some cases, like personal care products, they're actually added deliberately. So microplastics are now found everywhere. They're found in the water we drink, in the air we breathe, in some of the foods like seafood that we eat, and so as a result, they're found in us too. So addressing the environmental and health problems posed by plastics are going to require many, many strategies aimed at responsibly reducing our reliance on this material, recovering the polymers that have already been created, and of course cleaning up the damage that's already been done. This is a huge issue with a lot to cover, and we are not going to cover all of it today. We made the conscious decision to focus on recycling where we feel Central Ohio has some comparative strengths compared to the rest of the country and can serve as a model. Plus, as Ari noted on LinkedIn, thank you, I picked it up last night, tomorrow is America Recycles Day. That's pretty exciting. So, but there's still a lot to cover if we just focus on recycling. So as Tim said, we're going to break our discussion into two mini panels. Our first is going to dig in to modern recycling systems, both the technologies and markets, and why plastics can be a challenge to recycle. And then the second is going to look at the human element that comes in terms of recycling, and why it's critical to make the public an informed partner to make progress on plastics. All right, so with that, I'm going to ask our first group of panelists to start making their way up to the stage. We've got Rebecca Reichenbach, is Recycling Marketing Manager for Rumpke Waste and Recycling. She's responsible for plastics, marketing plastics and other recyclable materials like aluminum and fiber to companies interested in using post-consumer materials. Becky, I'm going to hand you the clicker. One of those companies that Rumpke works with is Advanced Drainage Systems, or ADS, represented in the middle by Brian King. Brian is Executive Vice President of Marketing, Product Management, and Sustainability. And I want to give a shout out to both Rumpke and ADS because they are corporate partners of the Sustainability Institute, and both have invested in programs across campus, including the sign backboards that you see on our recycling bins, to help the university make progress toward its net zero goal, zero waste goal. And then finally, we have Christian Blanco. He's Assistant Professor of Operations and Business Analytics at Ohio State's Fisher College of Business. Christian's done some really cool research into the effectiveness of recycling markets and how well-designed policies can help. So, welcome. Thank you for coming out. So, guys, recycling, not exactly a new concept. It's been around for a while, right? Generally speaking, the public still supports recycling. I think people feel good when they have recycling programs nearby, but there is some skepticism, and there might be some skeptics, here in the room in terms of what you put in the recycling bin actually stays out of the landfill. And that there are also some voices that are out there, kind of the people that you meet at the cocktail party that say, hey, doesn't recycling really enable us to create more plastic from petroleum because we can feel, guilt-free that it's going to get recycled at the end of the day. So we're actually generating more waste as a result of recycling programs. So there's been a few kind of criticisms leveled at recycling programs. But at the same time, and we're going to hear about this from Becky, there have been some pretty amazing developments with recycling thanks to technological advances that really seem to hold promise to recover more of this material. So given all these cross currents that are out there right now, and you guys are swimming in those cross currents, I'd like to start our conversation by asking, how do we currently recycle plastic, and what are some of the challenges that we face? And Becky, we're going to start with you.
Good morning. Thank you, Josh.
Yeah.
I think the first place I'll start is I am marketing for Rumpke, and I'm not like in my basement doing videos and social media. That's not the kind of marketing I do. I think I am, but I'm not. I market our recyclable commodities into the circular economy. So this really, this graphic shows exactly where all of our commodities that we generate at our 14 different recycling plants, where they go. This is something I manage. I make sure that each and every one of those end users is doing exactly what they say they do by recycling all of the items that we ship to them. That is a pillar of what we do at Rumpke. I don't think this is a common scheme or philosophy among other haulers or MRF operators, but this is something that I alone regulate where our tons ship to. Every ton out of Rumpke, I know that the end user is doing what they say by recycling that item. And of course, the geography here is key. Keeping our users close by allows really strong personal relationships, which is important. I'll get into this. The single stream ton is an imperfect ton. So a lot of times we ask our end users to know that they are also getting part of a product of that imperfect ton. So it helps with relationships, and then obviously logistics and freight can be much quicker when we have the users so close. And we are so lucky in Ohio, right? 8 paper mills alone in Ohio, right? Every plastic user is in Ohio. So we are very, very lucky on the end user portion in Ohio. I think, we may have it better than any state with the number of users we have. And then, so really the stream, right? We've talked a lot about this today and later today, but it's the residential and the commercial, right? So all residential single stream tons go to a facility called a MRF, Material Recovery Facility. right? We have 2 of those in Ohio, 1 in Cincinnati, and we do operate one right now in Columbus. We're building a new facility about a mile away from our current facility. And so we do a hub and spoke. We bring single stream residential materials from further away in the geography. We consolidate it, and we bring it to one of our 2 MRFs. So you can see there, the top oval is our Cincinnati MRF shed. I see a lot of chatter about waste sheds right now, but I think the MRF shed is much more important than the waste shed. So we gather materials, like I said, from the north. We have a similar oval for our Cincinnati region. And this isn't just about transporting the materials, right? We have another group at Rumpke that works with our MRF shed, right? The people in these solid waste districts, the cities, the counties, and we do joint meetings, trainings, educational seminars. A lot of times we actually ask our users to come to these educational events, and they are on the panel because it is a lot about education. And quickly I'll add, aside from the 2 MRFs, we do have 10 commercial recycling plants. So I know there's a lot of talk about, well, there's a lot of opportunity in commercial streams. This is something we've kind of, I feel like, quietly done, but we have 10 commercial-only recycling plants. And to support that, we've developed a team this year. They're called diversion specialists. So they are attempting to go out to commercial businesses and help them with their basic recycling, but also say, what's going in the waste that we can help them divert through the support of our 10 commercial plants.
And Becky, just to confirm, so the MRF, the Materials Recovery Facility, is that the same as a recycling plant? Or you use that term?
I think the MRF is one category, and then we have 10 other recycling plants.
Okay.
And they are not doing sorting, they are only handling commercial streams.
Okay.
From businesses.
With that segue, I'll let you explain a little bit about the Materials Recycling Center and our facility, and then we're going to jump to Brian.
Yeah, so this is our new facility that we are building. Right, this is the MRF, so it's the single stream ton that we are looking to sort out once we've picked it up from the bin at homes. You can see the material enters. Number 1 is our tip floor, and then number 3 is our sortation process. A lot of optics, slightly less humans than we currently use. We feel optics will do a great job and take us into the future. And then, touching again on the education piece, because I know that's so important, up in number 7, we'll have some very cool spaces. A COSI is partnering with us to develop an educational space. The university actually is has one of those blocks to bring students in for classes. So the educational piece is very important. This is very capital intensive, right? And aside from just buying equipment, right, we are seeing, again, the imperfect ton that is also evolving, right? So this breakdown shows back from 2018, the breakdown of the single stream ton. I can tell you that first line, that 13%, that's gone. Newspaper is gone, right? And we've seen a huge influx of plastics. Our plastics lines in our MRFs are completely overwhelmed. There are so many more plastics just in the last 5 years. And it's not just an evolving ton, but the plastics are also so much more lightweight. So we are seeing a lot of data that the pounds per yard of the single stream ton is dropping significantly because of this change in the stream. So we're definitely, it's really skewing the numbers because those are so much lighter, but we're seeing way more of them. So it's amazing just in 5 years, right? And we all know why, right? No one's reading newspapers. Everyone's doing everything on their phone. Earlier this year, Kroger said they were no longer distributing their weekly circulars, right? Because they want you on the Kroger app. So those are huge things. I believe this will continue to change. We're actually seeing that mixed paper number really start to decrease. Again, less paper, more plastics. that's a true, real thing that we're seeing in our systems.
Great, thanks, Becky. So Brian, we'll give you a minute here to talk a little bit about your perspective and the types of plastics that are out there that you guys can use.
So the joke is plastics, we have your number because there's 7 numbers. So who knew there were 7 numbers of plastics first? Who knows which numbers are recyclable? What numbers are recyclable?
1,
2,
and 5.
and 5, right? Super confusing. And oh, by the way, that changes depending on where you are in the US. So we at ADS use number 2 and number 5. So if we flip ahead, what do we do with number 2? We buy bales from friends like Rumpke. We sort them, we clean them, we wash them, we turn them into pellets. We turn pellets into plastic pipe. That is what we do. We do some other stormwater stuff, but it all tends to be plastic. Because it's plastic, we get tagged with a couple of things. You know, plastic is bad. We use 26% of all the recycled HDPE in the US we purchase. We would like to have more of that. One of the biggest challenges is that recycling is not easy. We saw the 7 numbers. That's not easy. It's also 40% of homes in the US do not have curbside recycling. So you want to make it easy to recycle, you need to have curbside, you need to get access, you need to explain what is going on. We do all that, we can make it into a pretty cool product because we take single-use plastic, we turn it into pipe, it lasts for 100 years. I would say that's a pretty good use of a recycled material, having it last for a century. And oh, by the way, it's better from a greenhouse gas emissions perspective. So what you see on the chart behind you is if you used an equivalent material, concrete or metal, as opposed to recycled plastic, that's what happens to greenhouse gas emissions. So we believe that recycling plastics is possible, and you can turn single-use plastic into a really good, durable good, which lasts 100 years.
Brian, thank you. All right, great start. We're going to keep going here. So at Ohio State, we've got a zero waste goal that starts with the premise of reducing and reusing, but in many cases, like a sporting event or events like this, we need to lean heavily into recycling and rely on post-consumer markets to ensure that plastics will find a new life. So, question for our panel, are the markets for recycled plastic doing what an economist would expect them to do and matching the supply with post-consumer uses? And Brian, I think we're going to start with you.
So I'll start with that. So who gets paid to recycle? Anyone? Does anyone actually make any money from recycling? No, you do it because you feel good and it's the right thing to do, right? So in a normal environment, if demand goes up, and I need more plastic to make recycled plastic pipe, if demand goes up, what happens? Price goes up. If price goes up, new entrants come into the market, they add capacity, price goes down. Unfortunately, in the recycling world, that doesn't work. And so we need to do other things to drive that demand. One of them is access through curbside recycling. Other is education, and we'll talk about that in some of the later panels. But the normal rules of supply and demand don't work. And so when I want to pay more money for plastic, it doesn't necessarily translate to what's going on in a MRF. When a MRF has material, I don't necessarily need it, right? So there's some weird sort of dynamics that exist in the economy. And ultimately, it means that we need to do other things than just, you know, if you could pay me to recycle, that would be a good way to do it, but that's just not how the recycling world works. The other fact, and this is in a group like this, I'll probably get killed for saying this, but if the price of virgin material drops below the price of recycled plastic, guess what I'm going to buy? It's virgin material. So you need to make sure that you're tracking alternate pricing in the marketplace. And so there's conversation in the recycling world about minimums and prices, but you have to look at alternate materials out there and you have to be competitive.
Thanks, Brian. So I'd like to invite Christian to kind of add a few thoughts in terms of, are these markets working well? Maybe a little comment about contracts and some of the inside baseball that goes on with these markets.
Yes, thank you, Josh. Just to clarify, I am not an economist, so you would have to ask an economist whether it is doing what it's supposed to do from an economist standpoint. But I'm in the business school. But I'll share a couple of insights from a few of the things that we've been doing in this space. And it was actually motivated by what Becca put there, the sword policy. I'll start with the supply side, which is actually the residential side, the collection. So it's kind of a reverse supply chain if you think about it, right? So as opposed to thinking about our traditional supply chain. So starting at the reverse supply chain with the demand side, the supply side, sorry, there's a lot of variation on what is and isn't recyclable geographically as well as over time. And I'll return to that in a bit in terms of what's driving that. But that variation, from operations perspective, we hate variation. In production and manufacturing, if you can produce one thing the same way exactly, for the first unit, as well as the 1,000th unit, right? That's like good production systems. But in this supply chain, it's kind of like your yield is unknown. So one, you're working with a lot of uncertainty in terms of quantity and volume. That's very difficult to manage. Uncertainty is not new in the operations world. Like there's agricultural commodities where the yield is unknown, but they have these interesting contracts that could facilitate or manage or mitigate these risks. But what's interesting about this space is that most of these purchases are called bilateral. So there is no such thing as an open market for this commodity. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but that's just an observation, right? So that's observation number one. And there's a lot of very fragmented players in this space. And when there's a lot of variation, what is recyclable, and so we collected data across different cities. We wanted to kind of find out what were the drivers of these like wish cycling, so putting things in the recycling bin that's not supposed to go there. But we found out something that wasn't a driver of this. So we collected a lot of data from different people like doing these experiments. And we found out that how long you lived in the city does not predict or how good you are knowing what is recyclable and not recyclable. And that leads me to my next point. And the reason for that is because what is recyclable could change over time, right? And I'm now leading to on the demand side of this market, and the reason for that is because the value of these items change. So we also collected 20 data on prices on per pound or depending on the item across 28 products that can or cannot be recycled across the US. And there's so much variation over time. And this is a very difficult market to manage. If you think about you as a manufacturer, thinking about dual sourcing, when am I going to purchase recycled material versus like virgin resin is also another driver. So, and the last thing, you touch on this notion of contracts. I'm not going to go deep into it, but the notion of what is the ideal contract is as follows. For example, this it requires the recycling industry needs a lot of capital investment upfront to develop these new technologies to recycle, right? So in other areas like California, they have more sophisticated, more advanced MRFs that could recycle like a list of like 100 items or something like that. But that's not the case for other areas. And again, that's driven mostly because of demand, right? When there's demand, supply will follow. But we need these contracts to try and figure out how to help out with cash flow for some of these investments, market signals. The other important thing about designing proper contracts is that each player in the supply chain have their own incentives, right? The MRFs is thinking about themselves. They're not thinking about the other, 1,000 other manufacturers they're trying to buy. And each individual manufacturer also is thinking about themselves and making sure that their production streams are leveled and things like that. So designing these contracts is very tricky. There's one popular one. I'm going to end in like 2 minutes here. There's a popular contract called the revenue sharing contract, and it works something like this. But again, I'm not sort of advocating for this contract as like the panacea for like. But it's sort of it's important to pin down or identify the correct contract. The revenue sharing contract is sort of inspired by a now non-existent or popularized by a non-existent company called Blockbuster. So here's some of the.
So it worked really well, is what you're saying.
Yeah. So they died because of Netflix, not because the revenue sharing did not work. So back in the day, so each DVD, so Blockbuster is a movie rental company that they rent out these DVDs, right? So the movie studios would sell them at $65 per unit, and this was from Best Buy's Blockbuster's perspective. This was too expensive, right? So they could only carry a small assortment of these DVDs. So they saw that as a problem because then there's a lot of stockouts. There's not enough capacity, right, to fulfill demand. So what they said to the movie studios, they went there and said, hey, why don't you pass this at cost to us? So which movie studio would ever pass their DVDs at cost? What would they get out of it? But then they said, okay, but for each revenue we make, for each dollar we make, we'll give you 50 cents. So this is an example of a revenue sharing contract. So that enabled Blockbuster to procure a larger amount or collection of DVDs so that they can rent it out, thus reducing stockouts. Okay, so where am I going with this in this industry? So these are kind of like the things that align incentives between the two parties. If they work in isolation, they don't realize that actually by working together and designing these contracts in a clever manner, they actually increase the total supply chain profits. But the next question is, how do you actually allocate the profits appropriately so that each player in the supply chain is incentivized to do what is best across the supply chain rather than in isolation? So something that maybe hopefully will return throughout the discussion.
That's great. So thank you for landing that plane, Christian. That makes a lot of sense, and it's kind of a good use of, is it game theory? That,
It
is
is,
that
yeah.
related
So you could
to
think,
it?
yeah, it was motivated by, yeah. It started
great.
off as, yeah.
Great. So I think for our last kind of question, we're going to do a little bit of a round robin and quick responses here. So we solve complicated problems all the time. Technology is part of the solution, but we've still got a lot of the way to go. Rumpke knows this very, very well. Christian started to answer this a little bit about how else can we make recycling systems for plastics that we currently have more efficient so we can continue to divert away from the landfill. So Becky, we're going to start with you, and you shared a pretty cool story with a visit by Procter & Gamble, I think.
Yeah, I think nationally there are over 297 MRFs, right? They're all different companies, some big national companies, some small independents like ours. So having like a set list for the whole country will be very challenging. I can assure you our new MRF in Columbus, we are building it for the future. We have our eye on multiple potential new plastic streams, and we even have lines and space to add more beyond what we even have on our radar. So that is something critical to what we do. And then a lot of what we do is, our headquarters is in Cincinnati. We're very close friends with P&G, who has many facilities actually right on the same street as our Cincinnati MRF. And they often, regularly, will bring a product that they are designing and in a nutshell, dump thousands units of this plastic product on our belts and see what happens to it in the MRF system. Does it get sorted? Are there any errors? Does something get missed, right? And they use that as a tool as they design either brand new items or they're looking to change something that we've all bought forever. Like deodorant sticks is a really big one. They're trying to make them all polypropylene so they can be sorted at any MRF that is sorting polypropylene, right? So we see this, a lot of these projects with P&G, so we really applaud them. We need way more of that, I feel, in the industry. And even, in the way future, probably after I'm gone, but, some of these EPR situations, my opinion is every packaging designer, before they graduate from college with their degree, has to come work in a MRF. To really see
For free.
For free,
For free.
yes.
Yes.
To really see that what they are designing has to be able to be recycled, because if we aren't going forward designing recyclable new packaging, or even when we look at revising something old, then they have to have that knowledge and that skill set. So I think that's something that I always say that that could be a huge changer in the future. But yeah, we love to do those trials.
That's great. I love that idea too, and it resonates. We've got a industrial design program here, and I think, and now we have an amazing new manufacturing or materials recovery facility close by. Brian?
So quickly, there's 4 things, right? We talked about 2 of them. 1 is access. 2 is education, which the second panel is going to talk about. Talked a little bit about recovery of materials. I would argue 7 plastics is probably too many. We should probably figure out which ones make sense to actually have. And then to Becky's point, as a product manager, or if you're thinking about products, you should definitely be thinking about end of life and what recovery looks like. When I went to school many 1,000 years ago, we didn't think about that at all. It should be something that, to your point, product managers and product designers think about. And then Becky touched on EPR, which is expanded producer responsibility, which essentially means if you make a product, you pay for actually the cost of the product in the beginning, and then the money helps from a recovery perspective in the end. We're big fans of responsible EPR. There's a lot of irresponsible EPR that's out there, but responsible EPR makes a lot of sense because what that allows the industry to do is invest in more recovery, more education, more access to recycling. And so we belong to a group called the Recycling Partnership. Their job is, they're a nonprofit. Their job is to increase recycling in the US. EPR would be a great way to fund something like that. And so as long as it's done responsibly, we're a big fan of policy.
Great. All right. Go bold. I like that. Okay, Christian, final word.
Yes. So on the supply side, from the residential ones, I'll just share like one insight from a study that we did with a marketing professor. So I'm not in marketing. So they were the ones who kind of like discovered, kind of like had the idea. So what we saw was that there are two types of errors, and these costs, the cost of making one type of error is not the same. So one type is you put an item in the you put a recyclable item in the garbage bin, right? So that's one type of error. So whether it false positive, or the other one is putting a non-recyclable item in a recycling bin. Okay, so they're both wrong, but these errors are not the same in terms of cost. One is more costly. So putting something that is not recyclable in the recycle bin is more costly than the opposite, because the opposite would be just an opportunity cost of not recycling that. So if you think about this, so we say, if you're not sure what it is, you say, okay, the cost of making a mistake of putting something in the recycling bin that's not supposed to go there is more costly, so just keep that in mind. So when you're making these decisions. The other one may be on the demand side. Now, this is where it becomes a bit more controversial. So we have been thinking of what sort of a national standard for recycling may look like. Okay, so I know there's going to be a lot of pushback there, but in terms of what is quality, right? How do you define what is a good quality bale, or like the definition of like quality across the U.S. on what is that is defined in isolation. So like data collection is also not standardized. You can't compare, one MRF versus another because maybe the metrics that they follow is very different. And then that also limits the diffusion of best practices, right? Because then you don't exactly know what is, one MRF doing over the other that's really making a difference. So, and then pushing that boundary to, should we really rethink about, again, there's a lot of variation of what is and isn't recycled. Now, on the extreme, you might say, okay, maybe that's a good thing. I understand why that is, because different local regions have different demand. But if you standardize what is and isn't recyclable, that might actually also send a very strong signal to manufacturers to commit, because now you have a more predictable stream of supply and net that could be beneficial for all. And I know not every MRF may, what does this standard look like? We don't know yet, so that's why I'm really gathering and interested in what to hear from MRFs of what this may look like. But one last observation is actually, there's already a minimum base of items that is almost universally recycled across the US. So it's not really that far away thinking about what should be recycled universally across the US. But adding some of these standards might send a strong market signal to make manufacturers commit to sourcing more recycled material. But again, of course, there's a lot of, there's a lot of, I understand there's a lot of friction with input, creating these standards. Yeah.
So, Christian, thank you so much. Well, we're going to excuse you for a second. Please hold your applause. We want to see how well they do compared to the second panel. But don't leave, because we're going to have you up for Q&A here in a second. So we'll have them back up at about 9:15. So go ahead and take your seats. And I'm going to go ahead and start introducing our next panelist. Yep, we've left the microphone. That's great. Andrew Booker. Andrew is Programs Manager at the Solid Waste Authority of Central Ohio, or SWACO. He works with the public, both commercial and residential, on ways to reduce reliance on the landfill. You don't have to wait for your name to be called. It's not the Oscars. Aryeh Alex is Sustainability Manager in the Columbus Department of Public Service, where he leads the city's residential recycling, organic waste, waste reduction, community education, and volunteer litter programs. Do you sleep at all, sir?
I don't.
Okay. Aryeh is also the executive of Keep Columbus Beautiful. They've got a table out here. Be sure to check it out. And then finally, we have Ohio State's own Mary Leciejewski, who works in the university's Facilities, Operations, and Development Unit to move the university toward our zero waste goal. So, welcome. So, first question for you all. At some point in the future, hopefully, technology is going to do all the work. Rumpke's going to have it all figured out. We're going to put everything in one bucket, and it's going to be taken care of. Materials will be fully biodegradable. We've got Professor Yale Vodovats in the background who's going to make that happen too. We'll figure out chemical recycling. It's going to be an amazing future. But until then, we're going to need the help of the public. So no matter what field you're in, it's always important to know your audience, right? And recycling is no exception. So who are we talking about when we refer to the public? And Aryeh, I think we're going to start off with you.
Thanks, Josh. So in the city of Columbus, when we talk about the public, we actually are looking at nearly 1 million individuals and with extremely diverse population. We have the second largest Somali population in the country. We have a large and growing new American population here. And we also have a host of different backgrounds and education levels. I think when I talk to people, I say, are you from Columbus? Most people I talk to say no. They came here for going to OSU. They came here for a job. And what they did in their recycling, where they're from, could be vastly different, especially if they come from a different country, which may have a totally different handle of waste stream. So we have an extremely diverse population here. And I think when we talk about the public, we have to talk about all of those individuals, not just the super recyclers, but every single person here, because it's not a one-size-fits-all approach to engaging the public. It's really an individualized approach.
So we also have, obviously, in addition to people that are recycling out of their homes, a lot of this waste is being generated by our partners in industry and businesses. And Andrew, I know you're kind of looking at both sides of the aisle there when it comes to residential and commercial activities. Can you share a little bit from your perspective at SWACO?
Yeah, definitely. If you don't know, SWACO is the Solid Waste Authority of Central Ohio. We own and operate the landfill in addition to implementing a lot of programs designed to get the material out of the landfill. And a lot of people don't realize that 60% of what comes into the landfill actually comes from businesses and not residents. So I think a lot of times we just almost instinctually think about residential material. In fact, Rebecca kind of made reference to the fact that there's a lot of material generated from the business sector, and a lot of the material is similar to what we generate in our home. I mean, a lot of office buildings, for instance, are generating a mix of materials that is not that different than what you and I generate every day.
Okay. Before we kind of move on to the next question, I'm curious, you used the term super recycler. Can you explain a little bit more what that means? And are they good for recycling systems, or are they problematic?
Well, yeah, so I call someone like a super recycler. They think everything can go in the recycling bin. That is wonderful intention. It often could be very harmful. We see this in some communities where they go, I know that plastic bag is recyclable, so I'm going to put it in there. I know it's recyclable at my grocery store, so it can go in my residential blue bin. Of course, it can't because it will jam up the machines and everything else. It is recyclable, but it's not in that appropriate stream. So you get these individuals that are all gung-ho about it, which I think is wonderful. We have to educate them to make sure that they are doing the right thing in the right process. I think that they are the individuals that are harder to change the behavior of than someone that doesn't recycle at all, because we can kind of start from scratch and say, here's what's recyclable and everything else. But we love super recyclers. We want everyone to be a super recycler, but we want them to be a super recycler writer, which I think is the appropriate way to kind of handle it.
Okay, thanks, Aryeh, for clarifying that. All right, next question. I think we're going to start with Mary. So statistics show that the public mostly supports recycling. There's some skepticism, as we mentioned earlier, as to how well the system's working, but generally strong support. So why isn't the public better at recycling if we're all so excited about it?
I think that's a really good question. So if we take anything away from this talk today, I think it's pretty obvious that recycling is confusing. There are 7 different types of plastics. It varies. There's a lot of variation in geography and also time. Here at Ohio State, it's especially difficult because we say that we are a city within a city. We have 100,000 people coming to our campus every day. A quarter of those students are turned over every year. So we get a new crop of students from different locations from across the state, from across the country, internationally, that we have to teach our system how it functions within Franklin County. In addition, we also have guests and visitors who come to our medical center for medical care. So there's just a lot of different people, and so you only have one instant of their attention. The other piece, of course, is even if you're in Franklin County, you're going to have a lot of variation in types of signage. You will notice at Ohio State, our signage is red. That is because our marketing department would not allow us to have any blue on campus. There are times when, just because it can be defaced, frankly, by our community. So we use red for recycling, but if you go anywhere else, you don't typically see red for recycling. And so that can be confusing. So you have to catch people with color, with words, and then also with signage.
Interesting. Okay. Andrew, Aryeh, would you like to take the next crack at this question?
Restate the question.
Yes. This is like Jeopardy. I think we were just basically, Andrew, we were just asking if people are so enthusiastic about recycling, the public in general, then why isn't the public doing a better job at recycling?
I'll echo what Mary said, and I actually, and Brian set us up very well. 7 numbers. If you live in Columbus, live in Central Ohio right now, have curbside recycling, the technical rules for recycling plastics, as an example, a clear plastic cup you can put in your bin. A red Solo cup, don't put in your bin. Yogurt container, tub, put in your bin. A clear clamshell container for strawberries, don't put in your bin. Plastic bottle, put the plastic cap back on. Aseptic juice box, don't put the plastic cap back on. Seriously, those are the rules. It's really hard. The plastics are hard, and I want to come back again to what Brian said. We need to put a little pressure on the folks that are producing materials to produce materials that are readily recyclable. We just need to kind of continue to push in that direction, because this material, of all the materials, is just technically a difficult and complicated topic.
All right.
So adding to what Mary and Andrew said, I also think that here in the city of Columbus, it's a level of convenience and priority. If you do not have a recycling bin right next to your trash bin, the likelihood of you going that extra step decreases significantly. And so, and that may mean if you have a trash bin in your kitchen, but you don't have a recycling bin in your kitchen, it's unlikely you're going to separate it there and then go out and take it outside to your blue bin. There has to be that level of convenience there. We also see it like a level of priority that you get. If you are a single parent, you got kids that are screaming, running around the house, you're coming back from your second or third job to make ends meet, and now it's, oh, where do I put this cup? What do I do with it? It's just going in the trash bin because I don't have the time to learn what's recyclable and what's not, and it's just not a priority. I believe in recycling. I care about recycling. I think it's the right thing to do. It's just not at the level that I can deal with when I come home. And I think that is a real challenge that we see, particularly in some of our communities that are struggling. We also see a lot of individuals that say, well, that was recyclable in my other home, or I didn't know that was recyclable here. And so you get this level of recycling education that is confusing because we don't have the ability to say, hey, every person that comes into the city of Columbus, let me sit down with you and explain how to recycle here. It's just not possible. And it's also, if we have that conversation, there's probably a million other conversations we should be having with those individuals about other things that they could be doing to improve their lives and a quality environment that may not raise to the level of importance of recycling.
Please.
I also want to make the connection, and again, kind of referring to some comments that were made at the first, but Aryeh pointed out that there's a real connection between education and programs, education and convenience. So we're very fortunate in Central Ohio, 97% of the households have access to curbside recycling. It's a huge success story, but we're continuing to make that even better. Columbus going to weekly curbside, again, making it easier. OSU and Mary, evaluating all the time, do they have enough bins? Where are they? What kind of signage do we have? So we're trying to just make, we need to link the education with the programs and education with ease of use. I'll throw out another one that maybe is not talked about enough, but there's a concept of universal recycling, which is whether you're a school, you're a business, it doesn't matter what you are, if you get trash service, you get recycling service. You know, that's kind of a policy approach, and that's kind of a program design approach that I think we need to move towards. We need to expect it to be there no matter where we're at.
Andrew, I think that's a really good segue into our next question, which is, how do we make the public a stronger partner going forward? Mary, let's start with you.
Sure. So at Ohio State, we think of the two barriers to recycling as access and education. So access for Ari and Andrew might be making sure that curbside recycling is available. Access for Ohio State will be that every trash bin is paired with a recycling bin. So that, because if, I'm going to tell you, if the recycling bin's over there and the trash bin's over there, you're just going to go to whichever one is closest. So we have embedded that within our operations, actually with some financial gifts from both Rumpke and ADS to supplement that infrastructure and make sure that that's available. The other piece is education. So we've standardized our messaging across Ohio State. So just like we're a city within a city, we have, I don't even know how many marketing departments, but at one point there were 5 different marketing departments putting out similar but not quite the same messaging on recycling. So we came up with a Recycling Right education program to have similar social media messages, similar slides on the digital ads, similar signage, just to make sure that everyone was getting the same message.
So Mary, actually, before we pass
Yep.
it off, isn't it true that custodial staff, dining staff, they're all part of the public too? And we've seen some gains by working with those groups and those staff members. Can you share a little bit about what we've been able to do in involving them?
Absolutely. So that's exactly right. So that is what it might be a little bit different at Ohio State than your household recycling, is that you're not the person often taking it out to the curb. There is an intermediary, and so that will be your custodial staff members. And so we've created an online module that everyone, at least within facilities operations and development, has to go through to explain the importance of recycling, what is recyclable. It's small, but for operations it's important, is that the bag colors are different. So there's black trash bags, clear for recycling, so that you can actually see if it's contaminated with food, and also just to differentiate from trash. And then we have green for compost in those locations.
Great, thanks.
What Mary's talking about is actually critically important and surprising to a lot of people. It's a weak link, oftentimes in schools, in businesses, the custodial staff, and so I really applaud what you're doing. I think the story that we heard earlier is just a critical story for all of us to repeat as often as we can. We have a really unique, successful situation here in Central Ohio in terms of not only the investment by the private sector in these very modern MRFs that are designed now to evolve rapidly, which is just not the case. 10 years ago, that was not the case. Strong partners like P&G that is actually taking product design seriously, and then just being able to really make people understand that we have a circular economy in Central Ohio, and it's unique. It really is unique compared to a lot of states. So I think we do need to kind of really emphasize that. And then I'm going to run a little bit counter to what I said before, but we also, I think, need to simplify the message to some degree. We don't want contamination. We do want super recyclers. I think sometimes when we have people that are a little bit skeptical to begin with, and a lot of competing, priorities, and we get into some of those really nuanced things, we actually are working against ourselves, because people they just might throw up their hands up and be like, this is just way too complicated for me. I'm moving on to the next thing. So we're starting to do an education campaign that's really focused just on where are you in the house and what's recyclable. You're at the mailbox, what's recyclable. You're in your pantry, what's recyclable. Each one is a separate little snippet of you're in your bathroom, what's recyclable. So we're just trying to really simplify it to be like real world. You're in a point in your kitchen, your pantry, and what is and isn't recyclable. Just really short, little, focused education messages.
Yeah, and to Mary's point about the recycling bin here, garbage bin here, I've noticed that sometimes we struggle, if we're upstairs in the bathroom, to take that plastic container all the way downstairs. It more often than not ends up in the in the trash. So we need an intermediary to help us with that. So, Ari, how about a little bit about policies?
Yeah, so I think when looking at policy, first, I think it is absolutely critical that we have extended producer responsibility. It cannot all be on municipalities and other entities and our residents to figure everything out. It's got to be simplified. There has to be some good end markets there. That's not going to be solved at the city level. I think that state and national level, I think we can do all of the education, we can connect with our residents, and we can do a lot of outreach there. But I also think when we look at policy, we have to really look at our historically redlined communities. And I think recycling is part of the solution to some of the environmental justice issues that we see with plastics in our communities. The City of Columbus does an annual litter index where we have our refuse collection drivers drive every street, every alley, every block, and they rate it 1 through 4 about how much litter they're seeing, 4 being the most. And this is publicly available. It's a GIS map layer on our city website. And when we sample that litter, first of all, we see the majority of that litter in those red line communities, in communities of color, in low-income communities. We see significantly more litter. And when we sample what that litter is, it is primarily plastics that could be and should be recycled. And so recycling in those communities adds capacity. It adds capacity in their trash, in their waste services, that they can put those containers in there. So knowing that they're recyclable, getting them in the right container is critical. Now, the messaging and education there is really important too. Sometimes seeing my face telling those communities, hey, you got to recycle, it's like eyes rolling. Like, I don't want this city employee telling me what to do. It's got to be individuals in their community and leaders in those communities. And we have to get that plastic out of those areas, because when those plastic bottles don't get in the recycling bin, they break down and they grind down and they become micro and nanoplastics and contaminate those communities that have already seen environmental injustices for generations. And so it is on us as a government to make sure that we are ensuring that those communities are clean, healthy, and safe, because we don't want another environmental cleanup problem that we have in another generation because we didn't provide the resources, tools, and education and support needed now to ensure that that happens. So that's where I think local governments can really make a big difference, but we have to lead with that environmental justice lens as we engage those communities and elevate those communities and the individuals in those communities to take leadership roles in this space.
Aryeh, I liked in particular your comment that the messenger is sometimes as important as the message, and I'd like to invite Andrew or Mary, because we have similar types of challenges and you both have very sophisticated communication systems for educating the public about recycling. Talk a little bit about how the messenger matters, Andrew.
It most definitely does. We did focus groups last year really on focusing on what we would call half-hearted recyclers. Folks that are right here in Columbus, right here in Franklin County, who self-identify as, I do a little recycling. And it was really a first attempt on our part to understand what messages resonate with them, we message test with different messengers as well. And I just think that that's where we need to go. It's not going to be a one-size-fits-all. It's not going to be one message that resonates with everybody. It's not going to be one messenger that resonates with everybody. And so it makes it'll be a challenge for us, all of us. But I just think that inevitably we need to be, folks need to be hearing from people that they respect and trust. And we just need to evolve our messaging to be kind of universal with multiple messages and multiple messengers.
So Mary, we're going to have you, finish us off here in terms of our conversation before we break for questions. But can we get the football team, do you think, to help us in terms of getting the message out?
Well, they're a little busy right now, but maybe maybe in December. No, but absolutely. Just like Ari said, I do not resonate with students. My intern, Logan, regularly called me old, and they see me as geriatric. So we do have a strong peer-to-peer program. So we work with Student Life. Tom Reeves at Student Life does a great job working with RAs who then tell the messages to all their floors. So it's like first week of classes, this is what you do, and it's told by someone that's close to your age. And then we also have a robust peer-to-peer education program. So mainly focused on compost, but they do some recycling education as well. So we have a team of over 60 student volunteers who will go tabling and teach people how to compost and recycle.
Great. All right, we're going to go ahead and pause here for a second. We're going to invite our first group of panelists to come back up, join us on the bench here for some question and answer. Joe, you're going to help us with the online version as well, I think, in terms of any questions that came in terms of chat. So a lot of good content here, a lot of talk about, extended producer responsibility, policies, national recycling standard, the ins and outs of a materials recovery facility. Any thoughts from the group here in the audience in terms of questions?
So yeah, please raise your hand if you have a question. I'll run the microphone over to you. We have 3 questions so far from the YouTube audience.
And Steve up here has a question too, so when you get a chance.
All right, let me take one first from one of our viewers on YouTube. So this is for Brian, actually, but I think everyone could answer. Of those numbers that aren't recyclable, which of these are being reused into pellets? Is it just the recyclable plastics that are used as pellets?
So the answer is yes, right? It's only the recycled product that gets turned into pellets, so 1, 2, and 5. Everything else up there is either what Christian talks about, which is wish cycling. It goes in a box and it gets hopefully sorted out. We talked about bale quality, though. That's a big deal, right? So we would like to have 100% HDPE in a bale when we buy a bale of HDPE. It's not that high. And so we have to sort that out because when we get contaminants in there, even polypropylene, I'll get too nerdy on science, but polypropylene and HDPE sometimes can work together at certain percentages, but we prefer it to be pure. So yeah, that's one of the big challenges. We as a manufacturer like to buy pure pellets. These guys like to provide pure pellets because they charge us more for them, which you should. And that's that.
One quick add about the 7 plastics and the ones that aren't, the 1s, 2s, and 5s. The other layer of education is really that first R, which should be refuse, right? So when we're out, shopping or making decisions, primarily at the grocery store, is that product available in a packaging that is recyclable or not? So, and refuse the packaging that isn't. So there's a whole another layer of education, maybe more for the super recyclers that would kind of get that, but that is something we should look at too.
If I may also just, our messaging to residents is frankly not about the numbers at all. It's way too complicated. So I do appreciate the nerds on the panel here, but we really just message to people this item is or is not recyclable. So I want to dissuade us from thinking that we're going to try to educate you on the numbers.
Gotcha. Like a Coke container is
exactly
is
like a plastic water bottle is recyclable. Yogurt tub.
So being someone who focuses on the numbers, could you clarify, this is Rumpke, is it 2 and 5 or 1, 2? What are the right numbers? That's the first question. Second, I'm sure I'm not the only person who pays attention to numbers and cannot read them. So is what's being done about it, and how does Rumpke distinguish the 3s and the 4s and the other numbers and get it out of your system?
All right, really quick, I might repeat the question because I'm not sure everybody heard, but Steve was asking about the numbers.
Yes.
And 1, 2, and 5, but also how does Rumpke read the numbers, and when you get some of those others that you can't recycle, what do you do?
Yeah, so just recently, we've shifted our education and message more to the style or type of item versus the actual number or what resin it's made out of. So most of our collateral today, our education material, is by shape and what the item is. So a bottle, right? Tubs, cups, those are really, that was an evolution that just happened probably in the last year or so that we decided to really not focus on that number anymore, but to go with the shape of what the item was. And those get sorted optically and via human in our facilities.
The other thing is that the recycling partnerships identified that problem, because good luck finding the number sometimes, and then good luck if your eyes are greater than the age of 30 in actually seeing what that number is. And so the recycling partnership is moving, actually putting on recyclable or not. And I think that's a big move to the points up here. Some number twos are or aren't recyclable. Some ones are or aren't. So just put on the product if it's recyclable or not. Now the challenge, of course, becomes it may be recyclable in Columbus, Ohio, but it may not be when you get off a plane and insert location here. And so what they're also trying to do is with your smartphone is be able to take a picture of what the product is, and it'll tell you where you are. It'll tell you if it's recyclable or not. Now, that's a big data problem, but that's the type of solution that I think we need to get to, because the number piece is good, but to the comment that was made up here, that's not the be all and end all. You want to know if the thing you're holding can be recyclable. Now, will consumers actually, you won't walk across the room to recycle, so are you going to actually look on your phone, take a picture of it, see if it's recyclable or not, and then choose to recycle it? Some people will.
We are launching, I think tomorrow, an online sign-making tool that is available to anybody, business, resident, community, on our website, that is just pictures and words, so you can, and it's all, so you can make signs that just illustrate what is and isn't recyclable. So try to forget the numbers. I know it's hard. Try to forget about the numbers. Just look at the pictures, what is and isn't recyclable on the signs.
So I had a quick question, mostly geared towards you, Brian and Rebecca, but anyone who has any thoughts. We talked about microplastics a little bit and how they're found in the human body and everywhere on the earth. So how do you guys help protect those workers who are working with you in your facilities and who are around this possibly for their whole life from the microplastics that they're working with to help support the recycling process?
So I'll talk first. I mean, we process pellets in our location, and pellets, generally speaking, are pretty safe from that perspective. It's when the plastics degrade in the environment that you get into some challenges. And so the number one thing you need to do is actually recycle, right? Actually get something off the ground, as the comment was made here about the social equity piece. If you can get it into the stream, your chances of it actually degrading and becoming a microplastic is significantly reduced, right? And so from our perspective, we think about, obviously the health and safety of our workers in the plants, using pellets, and we used to use flake. Flake is easier to process. It's not as many steps, but it's inconsistent and it has some EH&S issues, environmental health and safety issues. And so we moved to pellets, and that's what we're doing. I'm sure Becky will talk about what they're doing to keep people safe in the plant.
Yeah, and I agree. I think we're at a step in the circular economy that, like, Rumpke is way before it's become that microplastic in the environment, right? We're dealing with whole bottles at our facilities, and we've got a robust safety teams at all of our facilities and have a very high PPE or personal protective equipment policy at all of our facilities, even for visitors who come to see our facilities.
And just one more thing at the end of that. So what I'm doing with this microphone that's not working, but we also make treatment products at the end of the cycle. And so before water is released back into the environment, generally speaking, it has to go through some sort of water quality treatment solution. And we are looking at how do you actually then take microplastics at the very end? How do you filter out some of the plastics in there as well too? Because certain states are starting to think about that and mandate that from a stormwater management perspective, because that's where the plastic ends up. It's in your stormwater solution. And so we're pretty in tune with that. There's no real answer today as to how to do that or some approved solution for that, but it's definitely something that the industry is talking through.
At the city level, this is a not so fun fact, we see 52% of all litter in our waterways here. We have 5 watersheds that run through central Ohio. And so the majority of the litter that you actually see is not on the streets and alleys. It's in those waterways where it is breaking down. And a good chunk of that starts on the street or alley and goes through our stormwater system. And we can actually detect where we are seeing that source point, where we are seeing more litter, so that we can concentrate education and outreach efforts into those communities to try to prevent those microplastics from even happening, so that it can go in the proper disposal. But we are getting that data, but that is a frontline thing that an individual actually can make a huge difference on doing. And that's not going to be national strategy or anything else. It is literally putting the plastics in the right bin and stopping it from getting in those sources to reduce those microplastics here in our environment.
So we have basically a two-part question, and maybe I'll begin with Josh perhaps, and then over to the panel. First, what is an EPR? And then Brian Webb asks, what qualifies as irresponsible EPR? Should an EPR just be a standard expectation of companies?
Yeah, Brian, do you want to try to take both of those? Are you comfortable explaining the
Sure.
policy?
So EPR is extended producer responsibility, which essentially means if you make a package or product, you're going to pay some money in the form of either a tax or a levy or some other solution. When I say irresponsible EPR, what I mean is what happens to the money at the end, right? Who does it go to? Where does it go? What programs is it put towards? And there's all sorts of different answers out there about what can and can't work. And I think from our perspective, it's how do you help people who are in the space? How do you help cities from an education and awareness perspective? How do you help invest in technology? That's responsible stuff. I mean, there's other things that are being suggested out there, more punitive, punishment for things. And I personally don't believe punishment is the answer to it. So when I say responsible, that's what I'm talking about.
Which is a bottle deposit program technically EPR or not?
I'm going to... God damn this microphone. Sorry. So in places where there are bottle deposits, you see better recycling rates, but MRFs have challenges with that, and I'll let Becky explain.
Yeah, I think we just got there was a great report out of Michigan on the deposit bottle bill system, right? That system, I'm calling it a scheme, right, came out in the 1970s, right? And they have found recently in the last couple of years, it's actually getting less recyclables each year there. So I'm kind of like, this is an old scheme. Haven't we evolved and gotten better? Isn't there, a different way than something that was devised in the 70s that now we're seeing data that is actually producing less recyclables? So, I feel like, obviously with Rumpke and our investment, we would not want to see something like a bottle bill, or we would need to see the details of it. Our investment is based on the entire single stream ton, right? And each one of those commodities is critical for our investment to keep those in our stream, right? And to continue to invest. If you were to go and randomly start plucking items out of that entire system, it would have a very negative effect on Rumpke, this plant we're building, and the possibility of future plants. So I think we have to look very critically at bottle bills, and are they really a good plan or scheme for today's world? Because not only have we just changed in 5 years, remember that single stream ton changed in 5 years, but boy, have we changed since the 70s. So I feel like I'm still looking for a different alternative or different idea on that.
And I'll note that Becky had no problem with that mic, Brian.
So the origins of EPR actually is, so currently it comes from the electronic material recycling. So, and currently there's 23 states that have some variation of EPR, and it could be very different. So it could be something like, if you're a computer manufacturer or cell phone distributor, you have to have some sort of recovery plan. So most of it is actually more along those lines of, can you show that you have some mechanism to recover some of these materials? Now, actually, those were the early days of EPR, and now it's extended to other products, like there's a carpet EPR, there's like tire EPR, there's now like battery. So it's now being extended to these other products. But something to keep in mind is that its origin is from these electronics where there's a lot of value, very high value metals and minerals in these products. And thinking about EPR in the context of plastics, that poses a few challenges, but yeah, so I haven't seen anything or any discussions on EPR at that level, but you can think of it as sort of putting the responsibility of manufacturers to create way to recover materials back to their supply chain.
Joe, can I squeeze one more question in? Is that all right? I do want to ask about bio-based materials because it does obviously have it changes, your ability, I assume, and Becky, you probably know this a little bit better, it would change your ability perhaps to recycle it. But if we're basically going to train people and say, hey, this soda bottle is the right shape, but now it's no longer, it's no longer type 2 plastic? It's now, type 1 plastic. It's now a bio-based material. So it may create issues when it finally gets to the materials recovery facility. So I'm curious. I mean, we are doing a lot of research here at the university. We're looking at biofillers as a way to make plastics greener. But what does that pose on the other side of the equation for recycling efforts?
Yeah, I think that it's definitely a challenge for our space, and I'm sure if some of that got into like the HD space, and like some of the other bio products that we're seeing that can be compostable, that boils down to, I believe, in this area having a commercial compost facility that can actually handle that stream. I'm not sure that we have that in a big scale in Central Ohio, so I think that's definitely another concern.
So the city of Columbus, and working with SWACO and others, see this problem with our compost. We're doing a lot of food scrap drop-offs. We are starting to educate and collect organic materials for compost, and we are seeing a lot of compostable and biodegradable plastics that are going into that stream right now that our current compost system cannot handle. And there are some like BPI certified plastics that we can, but we're seeing a lot of plastics that say they're compostable, but it doesn't say in what stream, in what way. Do they go to a digester? Do they go to a windrow? Can they go in your backyard composting? And there's a lot of different confusion. When we talk about recycling being confusing, I think composting is getting particularly confusing because there are all different kinds of compost. And we are working to build out a pilot composting facility within the city of Columbus, which will be able to handle some of these materials. And I know the city is investing in building a large anaerobic digester here in the next 5 years, which will be able to take more of those materials. But knowing what's in those materials, and are they a combination of traditional plastics versus biodegradable or organic materials, I think is going to be the next challenge. And when it's really hard, when we can't educate folks the right way to what kind of bottles and cups go in the bin, imagine how hard it's going to be what types of food and other organic and compostable plastics and other items are going to go in there. And so I think it's the next great challenge, and we'll probably be here in a couple of years talking about that.
So you guys all have job security, is what you're saying, basically.
There's always trash.
There's always trash. So any final words on the compost, bio-based materials, what we're doing here on campus, maybe, Mary, to close things out?
Yeah, so dining services invested pretty heavily in compostable to-go containers, but we found we weren't capturing a lot of those. We didn't have systems to manage those, and it was expensive. And so I think what we're really proud of here is what Becky was saying is that refuse piece. And if you refuse on kind of the commercial level, so we've switched to a reusable container system in all of our Traditions dining halls, and it's going to eliminate over 1 million containers, to-go containers per year, which is exciting. And then you'll see like the red containers that you're using today. That's another piece of that reusable to try to eliminate the cost, but also just the product.
So we have the refuse table over here. Every time the word comes up, someone starts clapping, I think. So we got you've got a fan over here for sure. And then I also heard, when in doubt, leave it out, Christian, I think, in terms of the opportunity cost stuff. So, well, thank you all. We've covered a lot of ground on a small piece of the topic. Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
Please.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for putting a great discussion. I don't know if there is a question here or just sharing my perspective. This is because this is such an important topic. As an environmental sustainable profession, wherever I go, I'm always looking at the lights or HVAC or water or waste, okay, automatically. So, one of the good news is most of the residential or businesses, 90% or more of the waste is predictable because it's the same grocery list, it's the same thing. It's predictable. So I think the biggest thing to address probably is education is one thing, which is absolutely essential, but how do we drive change? Because knowing what is the right thing to do is great. Knowing is easiest part, but actually doing it is the most difficult thing. And I think, are there any strategies to actually affect behavior change? You know, really, that is something on the lines I wanted to ask, but yeah, this is my perspective.
Maybe, yeah, I'll share. So definitely incentives, right? People respond to incentives. This is what we've learned from our economist friends. So there's a couple of research projects that's going on actually at Fisher by a colleague of mine. So they've been looking at, so one project was to look at if they were to look at the bin, and so this is like public shaming, right? So like you would actually not pick up the bin, and people will go out and be like, oh, my recycling bin has not been picked up, and everybody will see, and it's kind of like, because you have contamination in the recycling bin. But this is very costly to implement, so this is more like research design, kind of see what mechanisms are effective. So there's these like they call it non-pecuniary, sort of non-monetary sort of mechanism to try and incentivize people because maybe they respond to like social shaming or things like that. So there could be some of these like creative like designs of try to incentivize people outside of the monetary context. But I think incentives, we need to think about incentives, whether it's monetary or not, to try and make people like respond to this.
I would also just say, we talked about it earlier, just making it easy. Making the systems just easy and obvious and simple to plug into is just critical, whether it's a business or a resident or a school or any different entity.
I'll add one quick thing. So in our new facility that we're building, we have a specific space for education, and at least here in Franklin County, Central Ohio, we will be doing educational classes there, and we will be giving tours of the MRF. And in the new facility, we'll have a single level platform the entire length of the facility. So I'm kind of thinking it's a one person at a time, come to the MRF, see exactly what happens through the whole plant with items. And I'm hearing they're going to be doing, at least for the first year, probably 4 tours a day. Groups, that was you. And that can be anyone. It could be any age level. I think getting school groups and young people in there is crucial to start doing more education so that those young folks, little tots, can see what's happening there and go home and get their households to make those changes. So I definitely think this new space we have at our plant is going to be a great asset to the education.
I'll be real quick. So we ran an incentive program off campus last year. We did 100 households for a can ferry project. And there was this myth that if you had a party at your house and you threw all the cans on the ground, that some magical can ferry would come pick them up. And that was not true. Those just became litter, and then someone had to pick it up. So we ran an incentive program with the university district, and we assigned party boxes to these 100 households, and we said every weekend, fill them with all of your cans and recyclables, don't put them on the ground, and you'll be eligible to win gift certificates and gift cards to local restaurants in the area. And we saw, almost a 90% participation rate and less than 10% contamination rate in those bins. And it showed, and we saw 0 litter. So none of those cans were making it to the ground. So an incentive program absolutely did work in that area. Now that is a very costly solution. We can't be giving everyone gift cards for doing the right thing, but it shows that when you go off campus and that material and the convenience may not be there, there are some solutions that kind of train that behavior and do the right thing, which we hope then as they become larger residents in our community, that they just continue that behavior for doing the right thing.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Please join me in giving our panelists a warm round of applause. Well done, everyone. And I get the pleasure of handing things back to Tim here.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks, Becky, Brian, Christian, Andrew, Ari, Mary. and of course Josh for moderating this very dynamic panel. As is our EPN tradition, we want to recognize each of you with a certificate of appreciation. And while Joe is handing out those certificates, I just want to kind of reflect real quick on this. Kind of took me back in my Wayback Machine to the early 1990s when I was in graduate school and I was first doing some research on, I was doing marine debris in the Chesapeake Bay and looking at what some of those causes were and what some of the things that we learned back then are still carrying through today, and the themes of education and the themes of trying to balance incentives versus just peer pressure and social norms and these types of things. It's a complex situation. We've seen norms change over time. The norm now is to recycle. I think most people do recycle and they want to recycle, but as we kind of saw here, it's complicated. It's hard to figure those things out. The simplicity of trash versus recycle is great, but do I put that in the trash? Do I put it in the recycling? And those types of questions and just those education campaigns. Education campaigns are really, really effective at changing behavior, but they don't last always. And so just the constant reminders, the constant need for reinforcing behavior, the constant need for incentives, all of these types of things carry over in these types of programs. So it's really exciting to see all the work that's going on, and especially at the local level, because it's really important, and it's really exciting to see what's going on here in Central Ohio. So thank you all for all of that. I forgot earlier to mention, we have a number of young people, young professionals, and students here in the room. On the back of your program is a list of sponsors who have helped us to reduce the registration fees for these students. So if you have a chance, take a look at the sponsors on the back of the program and join me in thanking them for helping us to further the EPN. That concludes today's program. Please turn to the back of your brochure for details on our next EPN event. Our 2023 series will conclude on the evening of Tuesday, December 5th with the statewide celebration of the Eastern Hemlock Tree. Outdoor enthusiasts touring Ohio's Appalachian parks and natural areas such as the Mohican and Clifton Gorge will recognize this evergreen tree tucked into the ravines and towering among Ohio's high cliffs and rocky outcroppings at nearly 70 feet in height. Stands of eastern hemlock host up to 100 unique bird species, and their riparian canopies nurse healthy stream habitats in Ohio's forests by offering cool temperatures and moist soils, harboring ecologically rich communities of native salamanders, fish, and freshwater invertebrates. While hemlocks are an indicator of ecological health and nature-based recreation and tourism in Ohio, they're under threat from invasive species and ecosystem loss. Join us right here at 5 p.m. on December 5th to learn from 4 charismatic leaders of the multi-pronged effort to conserve one of Appalachia's signature evergreen species. Alongside drinks and heavy hors d'oeuvres, Ohio State graduating seniors will open this event by displaying community-based project work with regional partners, including the Friends of the Lower Olentangy River, CODA, Scioto Analysis, Franklinton Farms, Victoria's Secret, and the Columbus Recreation and Parks Department, to name just a few. To start the new year, on January 16th, EPN and a variety of community partners are humbled to host Dr. Gail Myers. In 2004, Dr. Myers created Farms to Grow, Incorporated, to work with black farmers and local, state, and federal organizations to bring produce from black farmers and accurate history and education to low-income communities. She received a Special Commendation Award from the Ohio House of Representatives for contributing to the advancement of Ohio agriculture. Our January EPN program will occur on the 8th Annual National Day of Racial Healing and will address land access and explore the human connection to the environment through farming, gardening, and other outdoor activities, and the ability for agricultural experiences and acknowledgement of historical injustices to serve as healing towards racial equity. Registration for both our December and January programs are open now. And like all of our EPN breakfasts, these programs will be live streamed for free via EPN's YouTube channel. We encourage you to become an EPN member today through a free and easy process at epn.osu.edu. Once an EPN member, you can post events, job openings, and receive announcements about forthcoming breakfast programs. If you haven't done so already, add your name to our list of over 2,200 EPN members to further connect, grow, and inspire with fellow environmental professionals and enthusiasts in the months ahead. Thanks to Cassandra Johnson from the OEC, who signed up to join the EPN last week. While you're making your way out the door or clearing off your table, please help us to return toolkits with all pieces accounted for by scraping food off into the compost bin and returning all the red or scarlet dining materials to the bins located near the exit. If you're unsure on where to place, pages got stuck together, your utensils, then no worries, simply leave them at your tables and we'll take care of the rest. Thank you for your participation today and have a nice rest of your morning. Thank you all. Thank you. That was great.